Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Ulf Andreasen here. I am a systems engineer here in EMEA for Sumo Logic, and we are very soon going to start to talk about AWS Observability. So I'll just give it another couple of seconds here before we get going, because I know that there's a lot of people who want to join. So bear with me for about 30 seconds and we'll get going. Okay, let's that maybe wasn't 30 seconds, but I think we got most of the people on here that I've seen being who signed up for it. So today we're going to talk about AWS observability using Sumo Logic, and all depending on how much you've used Sumo before, but I'll just take you through a couple of slides here just to kind of set the scene and to kind of give you this, given all the other things we can do with Sumo. But and then we'll go into quick demo. I got a couple of questions, and feel free to type any questions into the chat box or the Q&A box, whichever you want. Hopefully I'm gonna pick them up wherever you type them, and we'll take it from there, really. So first of all, just a brief overview about sort of what we at Sumo Logic do. We have a platform we call Continuous Intelligence Platform, and it basically is a cloud-native SaaS service being delivered out of AWS. And with that, we collect any kind of machine data or any kind of structured, unstructured, anything that's effectively readable. It could be metrics as in numbers, it could be log lines, it could be traces or events, or even the weather data. So you can just kind of feed data into Sumo. We're going to handle the whole sort of, pipelining, getting the data into Sumo. If you get an on-prem environment, we can install some collectors there and we're going to collect it there. But there's also a lot of different open source tools you can use. So for example, if you're using FluentD or FluentBit or OpenTelemetry, we can use those things as well. Now, once we get in Sumo, we are effectively going to make it, available for search, which basically means we're going to index it, we're going to store it, we're going to make it available so that you and your peers can actually take a look at it. So, and the beauty with this is that there's no limitations on, the number of users or anything like that. And you can also group the users. You have role-based access control, so you can manage the kind of functionality, the different kind of data sets that you want to share with different people and all those kind of things. So there's a lot of flexibility, and all of this is being done by self-service. So you, as an admin of the kind of Sumo account, manages all your users. And of course, you get sort of training and support and all those kind of things for free, and you can just go into a platform and get it all access from there. Now, we typically provide, or we're typically being used by sort of people like yourself from 3 different use cases, I would say. Operational, where you want to understand how things are going, resources, how they're used, what's happening in the IT environment in general, not just kind of on-prem or cloud-based, but any kind of SaaS service that you're using. So for example, if you open up Jira tickets, if you have Okta for your identity management, how can you correlate all that data with what is actually happening on-prem or in your AWS account or wherever you are? business intelligence is not necessarily full sort of BI, but I would say that anything that we can extract from the logs could be kind of seen as business intelligence. So for example, if I get a shopping cart, I can see what articles are being bought, how much they're spending on it, those kind of things. But it's not true sort of BI in the sense of what maybe many other data warehouse type solutions would do. But we can do much of that, but it's that's not necessarily the focus per se. Now, I did say that we're a true sort of cloud native SaaS platform, and with that you get the flexibility, you get the kind of elasticity with regards to scale. We have a very sort of good and flexible licensing model. You are basically being charged for depending on how much data you're sending into Sumo, but there's a lot of good things you can do there, and you can also have different tiering with regards to the data you send into Sumo. So not all data is equally worth, and therefore you don't want to pay equally much for all the data even if you don't use it, right? So there's a lot of capabilities there. If you're going to send data into a platform like Sumo, you also want to make sure that you're kind of using a secure platform, right? Specifically in the days of these, and in the latest attack, for example, Sumo didn't really have any problems at all. We're not sort of being using those components, and to that said as well, is that Sumo is one of the most accredited and regulated, sorry, not regulated, but the accredited and certified platforms out there doing these kind of work we do. And everything is encrypted, regardless if the data is moving, as in on the network, or it's at rest or something like that. So we have sort of a lot of good security and sort of compliance in there. Now, today we're going to speak specifically about AWS, but what we also have is a continuous intelligence report that we, on a yearly basis, release. And what that means is that we're effectively looking at how our customers using Sumo and what technologies are they using. So this is of all the kind of 2,000 plus customers we have. And we can see that 59% are using AWS only, while some of them are using Azure, and there's a lot of multi-cloud, and there's of course a lot of on-prem. So 15% here, but I've also heard numbers, or we've seen numbers that basically 40% of all the data in Sumo is coming from on-prem environments. So there's a good mix and match. And that report, if you go to sumologic.com and you can just search for the continuous intelligence report, or go into this link here, you can just kind of go in and download that. And one thing that I want to highlight, and the reason we're doing this is that even if you're using only AWS, what we've seen is that the number of services being used by customers today is increasing. Pretty much the most used services are these ones here, right? But the most used services are probably EC2, S3, IAM, and sort of CloudTrail and CloudWatch and those kind of things, right? But the number of services are also increasing per customer. In 2018, it was actually down below, I think it was like 11 or 12. So this has been on a steady rise. The other thing as well is that the type of application is being more and more complex. There's more kind of components, there's more things be moving, so to speak, and specifically when it comes to microservices type applications and these kind of things, right? So you really need to kind of understand what's going on and kind of be able to see that. Now, so what I wanted to do today is really kind of talk about that and talk about how you can monitor and really observe what's going on in there. So even if your application consists of multiple different services, and they may be small as microservices, but they will still be there, right? So how can you monitor, how can you understand all those and get the sort of telemetry and things like that, right? So that's really what we're going to do. And we've done this in what we call the AWS Observability solution. Part of that solution is also the root cause explorer. And of course, much of this is kind of built by out-of-the-box content. So dashboards, alerts, all of these kind of different things that comes out of the box. So you don't really have to go and do much. To get the data into Sumo, we use a CloudFormation template. And that CloudFormation template, so first of all, you can deploy that in a stacked set, which basically means that once you've kind of deployed it once, you can then really make it go out to all your different accounts, all your different regions by effectively one sort of CloudFormation template and collect all that new data. So even if you've already started the collection and everything, if you add more services to a specific region, we automatically going to pick that up and collect that, and you will see that within a couple of minutes in the Sumo portal. So it just makes it really simple, really efficient to kind of, to get all this data. Not only just getting the data that you want to collect, right? Like logs and metrics and everything else, you're also going to get enrichment of it, so that you know that for every single log line or metric, where does that come from? What sort of service does it belong to? What region does it associated with? What account? And all those kind of things, right? And that really makes it much more worthwhile when you want to start to look at this. The beauty with this as well is that all this is automated using that CloudFormation template. So you kind of kick that off, you wait for 10 minutes, and then you go into Sumo and you can see it all in there. You don't really have to do anything more than that. And for those of you guys who don't want to use CloudFormation template, the Terraform template is being built, and that's going to be released very, very soon. So we are kind of standardizing everything we do in Sumo as being either CloudFormation or Terraform, and in many cases, both of them. Unless any questions, and I don't see any of those. So as I said, if you do have any questions, feel free to just kind of pop them up in the chat or Q&A window. But let's go into the demo. And so for this, Sumo has a lot of capabilities. For this, we're using what's called the Explorer. And the Explorer is kind of something that you will get from here. There's a lot of other things you can get as well, but in this case, we're focusing on the Explorer. And this uses a lot of out-of-the-box content. One of those things is the observability solution. Other ones are effectively the Kubernetes solution or the tracing and application solutions. So there's a lot of other things we can do, right? But let's focus on AWS. So imagine that you get 4 different accounts in AWS. You want to see them all. You can slice and dice. You can make sure that some people are not going to be able to see them all, but, I want to be able to see them all. Now, for every account, I can open that up and I can see the different regions which are being used. And as you can see, when I select something here, I automatically update the dashboard on the right-hand side. And I can then go into region and I can effectively see the data services that are being used within that region. And now my dashboard is only looking at that region, not at the account. Although it's the same dashboard, but it's completely different set of numbers. So this is kind of one way, and you have the filtering mechanism up here as well. So, you can deal with that there too, right? Now, if we want to take something simple, like everyone's probably has an EC2 instance, I want to be able to see what the kind of status of my EC2 instances is for this region. So I can see that there's a couple of EC2 instances here running hot from a CPU perspective, and I can see some of them are running hot from a memory perspective. In general, for the whole region, usage is kind of 72%. always take that with a grain of salt, but we're trying to give you the kind of status of how things are in this region. Now, you can always get to details of this. There's a lot more details here, right? You can kind of see different kind of metrics here, basically kind of stands out. But let's kind of dive deeper into one of the instances. And as you know, I have all my instances here, but to be honest, the names are horrible. So, it's just hard to find one. You can, of course, search and use the filtering. But one thing you can do as well, just click on any entity in here, right? So I can click on the kind of i3 large instance type, or I can just click on this instance here that is running hot. I get the entity browser and I can go straight into the logs for that EC2 instances. Or I can just look at the error logs or error signatures, which I'll get to later on. I may also have some recommended dashboards, things that I think you should be looking at. If you're already looking at this, maybe this is going to be something that would be of interest as well. But I also got sort of the related entities within this. I clicked on the EC2 instance and that's here. But I also kind of see like the related region or account to this. Yes, we're coming from that here, so it's pretty basic, right? But this will be more useful when you're getting into microservices and more complex systems in there. Now, let's dive into that specific instance to kind of check. So just by clicking on that, I get to the instance itself. And although it was running hot, it's not necessarily that hot or it's at least gone down in sort of hotness, so to speak. But here is the information for this specific instance. And I basically have that here, right? So I can kind of easily see that. Now, we collect the data from these instances and we don't sort of use the CloudWatch data there. So you can easily go and get your total memory statistics or your disk utilization, stuff like that, right? So it's much more convenient from that perspective. And you can also dive into the details of this to really see it for the last 60 minutes. So the time frames here are typically 24 hours, like the main dashboard is, but you can always kind of dive in here and you can even just type like, say, the last 3 minutes, and I can just type that in and kind of see, oh yeah, obviously we're only picking it up every couple of minutes or so, so that maybe isn't that useful, but the point is that it's there, right? So I can always get into these details. Now, let's look at something more kind of, maybe closer to what you guys are doing mainly. And, if you're using Lambdas, you can get the kind of statistics over all your Lambdas within that same region and account. This is my production account, so that's obviously why I'm looking mainly in here, but I also get something called dev and stage and other things, right? Here I can see my caller invocations or the locations of the callers calling on this Lambda functions or on these Lambda functions, because it basically is everything, right? I can see some statistics here, like invocations over today versus yesterday, or the duration of the calls. Again, I can always kind of do that comparison to what happens today versus yesterday versus last week. And it's a bit busy in here, but again, if we go to 15 minutes, then maybe it's going to be a bit easier, maybe not very easy, but just hovering about it, I'll kind of get the details of there as well. Now, I can just take one of the function names here and I can get a bit more details into that, right? So here's the kind of invocations for this specific function. So that maybe is more kind of close to what you really want to see, right? You can see the kind of functions, invocation by function variable and stuff like that, or sorry, function version. And there's a lot more details into this as well. What you also can do is that you can have different dashboards depending on what you're looking at. So right now we're looking at request analysis, but maybe you want to look at some error analysis. the number of errors you're having, what types of errors you're having, error messages. These are the kind of things that would be quite nice to have and to be able to sift through when you're looking for something. But not only that, we are actually also providing some threat intel to this. So a couple of you guys were interested in security here, and just briefly, I'm not going to cover all of the security, but just briefly saying that Sumo Logic has an integration to CrowdStrike. So we get a lot of threat intel from them, which is continuously updated. Now, you can use that threat intel to actually do lookup. So when you have sort of, for example, a function name, something like that, when you have different callers, you can see based on the IP address or based on sort of an email address or whatever it may be, you can actually look those up and you can see that there's actually some sort of actor names here. So Mummy Spider, for example, is a common sort of actor that is out there doing a lot of bad things. And of course, you want to be alerted, or you at least want to be in control of what's happening within your environment so that you can take actions against that if you need to. So, I mean, that's out of the box, and you can tweak and you can kind of change these to your heart's content, really. So there's a lot of good things you can do. Now, let's go back here, because I also want to show you, you can see here with regards to success and failures that we get a lot of problems here. We have the get billing information. That is causing us 700 problems in the last 24 hours. This is also, in total, we get quite a few number of errors here, but this is kind of the highest number that we have from any single function. And I can actually see that better here, because when I look at successful versus failed requests, the get billing function is basically failing all the time. So that is obviously not good. That it fails sometimes, that's probably always going to be so. But failing all the time, then obviously we get a bit of a problem. So what I can do here is that I can go into the error logs of this. I just clicked on this one, get the entity browser up. Let's go into error logs, and I can see that, the 702 failures, this is the aggregated measure, but just go to the logs. I can see that this is a database authentication problem, invalid credentials, and I seem to have a few of those. What I can do here, just click on the error message, and I can see that, out of these 720 problems, all of them are related to database authentication error. So obviously something's happened here. If we go back to the Explorer, let me filter on the get billing info. So, here, now I've filtered this page on only get billing info. So obviously it was spiking up quite heavily today as well. So it's kind of gone, there's been some problems here before, but now it's kind of spiked up a lot, right? I can also see that with regards to the operations here that's been taking place, there's been a couple of updates to it. I can't see the timing of it, but basically there's been some updates. So let me do like this. Let's jump into the search itself. And again, this is only going to give me the aggregates, but what I want to go and do here is to actually look at the event name of the update configuration function. I could, of course, change the code here, but this browser, this field browser, also gives me a very simple way of navigating through the kind of raw material, so to speak. So just selecting the configuration here, I can see that the main guy, so Mark Smith is the guy who's actually been doing sort of things here. And again, I can see that Mark is the guy who's been doing all 3 updates for the last, what was it? Sorry, I didn't look, but it was the last hour, the last 24 hours, yeah. So in this case, I would go and speak to Mark, because obviously there's been a bit of a change there, and suddenly it doesn't kind of work from a access point of view. So probably something wrong with the credentials that he's provided or whatever he's been doing, right? But that's kind of one thing that I would obviously easily be able to see. I could sort of run a call here to basically say like, okay, when did he do this? Why did he do this? Or maybe not why, but when, and so on. But this kind of gives me quick information to just go and look at this kind of, to be able to go and find this pretty much immediately, right? Without too much investigations. So, so sorry, there's a question here. Can Sumo only sample events errors coming from Lambda? We have 220 million invocations per day. And we can indeed kind of only collect, things that are causing errors. So for example, in the collection of data to Sumo, let me just quickly show this. So when we have a collector, and okay, I don't have anything specific, so let me just pick this one here. In Sumo, you can use something called processing rules, which basically means that you can include or exclude, or you can hash data. So there's a lot of good things, which basically means that you can say like, okay, here's a log line coming in, I want to exclude data if it doesn't actually contains the word error, or some kind of regex to be able to do that. So you can definitely kind of be very distinct with what you're collecting, and not necessarily collect everything, because as the question sort of says here, right, if you get a lot of successful calls, then maybe you don't want to collect those. So this is what you can do in Sumo. Now you could of course kind of handle this within the collection in AWS as well, because we are picking this data from AWS CloudWatch, so or from Kinesis Firehose as well. So there's alternative ways you can do that too. So there's always different ways you can kind of do something like this. But those are some of the things we can do. So yes, you can be very specific about what you're collecting and not necessarily collect everything. One more thing to add to that is that when we collect data, we can put data into different tiers. So any successful collection, any successful invocation of the Lambda could go into what we call infrequent data tier, which basically is very cheap from a cost perspective. Now, anything that contains some kind of error or not successful, then you would put that into the continuous tier, which is a real-time tier, and which you really want to be using for any kind of alerts or kind of things that are standing out, so to speak. Hope that gives you a response. And in the meantime then, or as the next kind of section of the demo here, what I want to be able to show you as well is another typical issue that we see. Most customers are using some kind of application load balancer or load balancer of some sort. And you can, of course, see the kind of requesters. You can see the rates of 500s or 400s or whatever errors you may have, and the number of connections and all those. What maybe you really want to focus on is any kind of spikes or anomalies. So we want to be able to kind of quickly show you when you have some kind of anomaly. And for that, we have something called, in pretty much every dashboard here, or with every service, we also have something called the events of interest dashboard. This is going to show you, this was those two spikes you saw in the previous view. And basically, you can now see that this is a ELB 500 error, the number of them, the count of them, has spiking up for 700% for almost 20 minutes here, or for 20 minutes. So what I can do, I can also go into what we call the root cause explorer, and it's going to give me the same view. It's just going to give me that from a more, first of all, it's only showing me one of them. Oh, sorry, no, the other one is probably coming here soon. But basically, it gives me some more flexibility in what I can do here. So this is filtered as well, and I can filter all this data on many different things. So one is the AWS environment. The other one is Kubernetes or tracing or application services. What was that? Of course, there's a demo, and there's always going to be something, right? But yeah, let's see what we can do here with this one we have. So you can also kind of handle seasonality or any kind of stability in your signals, because what we're doing here is looking at the SRE signals that sort of the Google guys basically put together some time ago, right? So we've identified different events in the environment. Those events are typically anomalies or outliers, and we are categorizing those as different sort of signals. And what I can do here, so now when we came here, we were looking specifically about the load balancer. So the first thing I want to do is remove that, because this could be my errors here. I'm still looking at this time frame here. This is kind of what caught my eyes. And what I can see here, this is my ELB error that I have, my 500, right? I can just click on it. I can see that it's been spiking up here for 20 minutes. Normally, what happened for like 1 day ago or for 1 week ago, normally it doesn't behave like this. So this is definitely an outlier that I want to look into. I can even see that, I have a lot more information here, like some more metrics and some other things, right? But what I also can see is that I have some, let me see, I got some Lambda issues here that maybe isn't correlated or related, but I got some CPU load average, where it's not just one, it's actually multiple instances. So we're grouping these as well. So, I can go into a specific instance here, I can see those, but basically these are just different EC2 instances that are helping me out driving the kind of the application I'm having here. And I can also see that I have a DynamoDB bottleneck taking place here with read throttle events. Likewise here, it's spiking up for 1000% for 20 minutes, slightly before the kind of ELB error here. So the beauty with this is that what normally happens is you kind of look at the signals from the kind of right to left, so to speak. And what I would suspect here is that this DynamoDB bottleneck is kind of causing some issues, which are then causing some load issues onto the EC2 instances, which are then causing some issues with regards to the load balancer. So what I can do here is that I can dig deeper into the entity browser and look at the dashboard for my DynamoDB. Right now, this is looking good here, but let's go into the events, because again, I want to take a look at what sort of events have been taking place. And here I can see that I have some delete and describe tables, but I also have an update table that I want to look deeper into. So again, I'm going to do as I did before, going into the raw messages, and I want to look at that update table. And there's only one of those. And I do know that we use read and write capacity units of 5. So at this point in time, right before the DynamoDB started to see a bottleneck, we actually changed the read capacity units to 2. And we was, in this case, the engineer Ankit Goel. So in the case of this, I would go back to him, or maybe they've already done this because this was an older event, so to speak. But I would go back to him and check with him, because we should really increase the read capacity units here to 5 again. But as you can understand, this is a demo. What we're trying to do is kind of cause something that causes an outlier. If we do this too often with the recurrence, then of course the system is going to learn. So we kind of have to tweak this on a continuous basis to kind of just make sure that we're finding these issues again, right? And that's kind of our challenge in that, so to speak. Now, of course, when you are here, you would, of course, want to be alerted of something like this before it really happens, or at least the kind of ELB errors, right? So Sumo already provides out-of-the-box alerts as well. So there's many different alerts that you can create your own, but you also have AWS Observability that provides it when you actually install it. Likewise, if you have a Kubernetes environment or many of the other environments, you're getting sort of those monitors or alerts as part of the package, so to speak. And it's all folder structured here. So when I go into the AWS Observability alerts, I can kind of see those here, right? Let me see, the application load balancer 500, I have those here. And it's not that you're just alerting against the count of the 500s. What we do here is that, first of all, we're picking up the number of alerts, the number of problems, as in 500s we see, based on the load balance and the different accounts and regions and namespace. We then look at the total request account, so that we can actually calculate the percentage of this. And that percentage is, if that increases over 5 in this case, but I can put any number here, right? If I want to use 8% or 3% or whatever, then I want to be alerted. The only reason why all of these are disabled is that because we want you to kind of fill in how you're going to alert someone. So if you want to use kind of Jira, or if you want to send an email, or maybe just put it into Slack channel or Teams channel, whichever way you want to alert that. And there's multiple different ways, and you can just set this up. This is using sort of webhooks and stuff like that, so you can pretty much interface with anything you want. And then, of course, you probably want to give it some context as well. So you can have descriptions, and you can have sort of pointing to different playbooks and stuff like that as well. That's kind of something that comes out of the box, so to speak, and you can just kind of use these. You can also change those, right? You can change it, you can copy it, you can do all sorts of things like that. But we're just trying to give you as much context out of the box, and really trying to kind of, show you the value of having that, and give you that. And talking about the out-of-the-box content, sorry, there is pretty much everything you can think of, right? From a AWS, Azure, or GCP perspective. All of the different data services are typically covered. And yes, there's always going to be a kind of catching up, because we're trying to add content here, depending on the kind of different technologies that are being used, also depending on what customers are asking for. But you will find pretty much something that is kind of something that you're using, right? And of course, the kind of host metrics, performance data, processing information, stuff like that, it's already here. So there's a lot of that. But so I'm hoping I've given you a good sort of look through of what you can see when you use AWS Observability. As I said, there is kind of many different data services, many different ways to look at the data. So, and also when you run a Kubernetes cluster, if you run that on top of AWS, you're of course going to have both a Kubernetes solution as well as the AWS solution that's going to provide you useful data there. And, so we're adding to this all the time. So just kind of summary of what I did show. There's a lot of out-of-the-box content and integrations here. It's dead simple to kind of set up the AWS Observability. It's also the whole simplicity with setting up and running it, because basically you get a CloudFormation or Terraform template, you push that out and you wait for like 15 minutes, and then you're pretty much good to go, and just open up the browser, log into Sumo, open up the Explorer, and you have pretty much the data coming in there. The root cause explorer, as I showed you, is very much about analyzing data and finding sort of outliers and anomalies. This is mainly driven by, or this is driven by metrics, but the point is that when you find something in the root cause explorer, you will sort of pivot into logs or metrics, logs or traces or any other data sources there. And the beauty with it is that you keep in the context, you keeping the kind of the entities or objects you're looking at, and you really kind of are able to pivot into logs from the metrics, from the outliers and things like that. And of course, the alerting is what you want to use for when you actually get into kind of something that you want to be highlighted or before. So summarizing the Sumo Logic differentiators, really we're able to kind of capture any kind of readable machine data that comes out of your systems. And as I said, any sort of metrics or any logs that are basically readable, and you don't have to parse the data when it comes into Sumo. You can just basically collect it. You can parse it when it comes into Sumo, or you can parse it when you write the search query. So you can just bring in the data, look at it, experiment with it in the searches, and when you know what you want to keep, you can then basically use the processing rules to exclude things that you don't want to. You can exclude parts of a log line even if you want, if you want to. So you can be very distinct. And then you can basically start to parse the data when it comes in. So you don't have to do that in the search, which also means that your search is going to go quicker and things like that. We use kind of the cloud native architecture, which really means that we scale with you in that sense. We have a very flexible consumption model, so that you don't really, you pay for what you use, and you can be very kind of much in control of what you're using, right? And from an analytics perspective, we're using a lot of different machine learning and advanced algorithms, outliers, anomalies, those kind of things, right? Trying to help you to identify things that you should be aware of. And of course, we do this with security in mind. I'm realizing I'm kind of running very much over here, but keep with me for another couple of minutes or two. I don't see any other questions, but what actually I did have a couple of questions beforehand. So some people are interested in the security and the kind of SIM aspects and stuff like that. So let me go back in here. I just quickly want to show you something as well, right? So if you're interested in security, and there's actually a session tomorrow with something we call the Cloud SIM Enterprise, or CSE. You can just pivot into that. It's a different user interface, but basically it uses the backend data that we already have. We're sifting through this data, and we use a lot of advanced sort of algorithms and analytics here to identify not just the signals and alerts, but also what we call the automatic correlated signals. So we effectively correlating the signals, associate those with an entity, and then we keep track of that entity for a fortnight. That's kind of unheard of. There's no one out there having a SIM that can track an entity, which is a IP address, a host, user, something that you can actually kind of see as an object of some sort, and we can track that for 14 days. So that's kind of I would urge you to take a look at this one here. So where you find the live demo of this, where you're registered, there's also the Cloud SIM session tomorrow that you can take a look at. In fact, when you go to resource tabs and the learn aspects here, there's a lot of different cert jams and workshops that may be of interest. Very soon, there's also, as in on Thursday, there's also a metrics-based workshop that we're going to run. I think it's kind of, it's European friendly. I think it's 3 o'clock UK. Which means 4 o'clock sort of mainland Europe. But, you know, as you can see here, there's both certifications as well as workshops. So it could be of interest there. And yeah, just some basics around that. Yeah, sorry, that was a later one. But basically, have a look at this kind of resource page and the learn section of that. Lastly, I would also ask you to kind of take out the free trial. You can do and you can see everything that I've done here. For 30 days, you get a full free trial with Sumo. You can ingest as much data as you want effectively. And, you know, me and my colleagues are happy to help you to kind of stand up, you know, make sure you collect the data and also get some actionable insights, and you can actually see something useful with it. So happy to help you with that, and let me know if there's anything we can do there. Me and my colleagues are here. You know, my email is ulf@sumologic, but basically reach out to anyone in Sumo, will help you. So with that, I want to thank you for today, and you know, see you next time. Have a good day.